Imagine this. It's your wedding anniversary. You're at work, hands covered in flour, preparing a romantic dinner for the man you love. You glance at your phone and see his text. Sweet, loving, perfect. You smile. And then you look up through the glass window in front of you, and your entire world cracks in half. Because there he is, your husband, in your restaurant, with her. And he has no idea you're watching. Most women in that moment would have walked straight out and caused a scene. Zoe almost did. But then a detective friend grabbed her arm and told her something she wasn't prepared to hear. That what she just witnessed was the smallest piece of a much bigger trap. And that if she moved too soon, she would lose everything. Every penny, every right, every chance at justice. This is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about a woman who played smarter than everyone who tried to destroy her. Let this be your reminder. Wisdom is the deadliest weapon a woman can carry. If you felt that in your chest, you're not alone. Leave a comment, hit like, and share this with someone who needs to know they're stronger than they think. Subscribe. More stories like this are coming. This content was researched, built, and manually edited by us to bring meaning and lessons.
All right, so the story we're diving into today comes straight from a listener, and I gotta warn you, this one is heavy. It kicks off with something we all know, something simple, a text message. It's 9:47 in the morning when Brittany Hayes' phone lights up. It's from her husband, Jake. He's wishing her a happy anniversary, throwing in a casual lie about being swamped at work and promising they'll celebrate later. She's standing in her office, the heart of her own restaurant. And as she looks up through the glass, her entire world just seizes up. Because there he is, sitting bold as brass just 2 tables away. And our source tells me he's kissing a woman with fiery red hair. A kiss that looked so practiced, so routine. It was like a scene they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Brittany's first thought was just pure rage, right? To get up and unleash hell. But before she could even move, someone stopped her, whispering that the cheating, that wasn't even the real story. My source told me later, I'm just so glad you're sharing this journey. And if you're listening to this right now and it's hitting home, I'd be interested to know where you are, your city, your country. Because even though we've changed the names, the gut-wrenching lessons here about trust, betrayal, and survival are the same everywhere. The morning of February 14th, 2024, was one of those cold, gray Wednesdays. It was 2 years to the day that Jake Miller and Brittany Hayes made their promises to each other. I learned she'd been at her restaurant, the Copper Pot, since 7:30 that morning, a full 2 hours before they even opened. She was in the middle of planning an anniversary dinner, meant to save the very thing he was, in that exact moment, burning to the ground. The air in her office still smelled like yesterday's cinnamon pastries. Through the big window, looking out into the dining room, she could watch her staff getting ready for lunch as the morning light poured in. The special for that night was a saffron risotto with local morels, a dish that wasn't just food to her and Jake, it was a memory. It was the exact meal she made for him on their first date 5 years ago, his all-time favorite. She was carefully laying out the ingredients when her phone buzzed on the counter at precisely 9:47. The screen lit up with his text. The happy anniversary, the lie about work, the empty promise of a celebration. For a split second, a wave of relief washed over her. Just this stupid little flicker of hope that maybe things weren't as shattered as they felt, that the cold silence that had taken over their home wasn't going to last forever. She was about to text him back when a flash of movement out in the dining room caught her eye. It was a navy blazer, a way of standing so painfully familiar that her pulse hammered in her ears before her brain even caught up. She lifted her head from the prep station, looked through the glass that separated her world from his, and there he was, tucked into a corner booth, not even 30 feet from where she was standing, completely frozen. Jake Miller was sitting in the copper pot in Brittany's restaurant, the place she poured every ounce of her soul into, the place he swore he couldn't get away from work to even call. And he was wearing that same navy jacket she'd gotten him for Christmas, the one he said made him feel distinguished. He was leaning back in his seat, just radiating this easy confidence of a man who thinks he's completely invisible. But he wasn't alone. Across from him was a woman, her long crimson hair like a warning sign, her hand resting on his arm in a way that screamed intimacy. And then it got worse. The woman stood up, walked behind him, and wrapped her arms around his neck before leaning down to kiss him. And this was no friendly hello. This was a deep, possessive kiss, the kind that speaks of shared secrets and late nights. He responded by reaching up to cup her face, a gesture Brittany knew like her own heartbeat, a gesture that was supposed to be hers and hers alone. Her phone just slipped out of her hand, the screen still glowing with Jake's lie about being trapped at the office. Time just seemed to stretch and twist around that one soul-destroying moment as she watched the man she loved betray her in the restaurant she built. From only a few feet away, her mind was just scrambling, trying to find any other explanation. A mistaken identity, a nightmare brought on by stress, some kind of sick surprise party. But there was no mistaking that jacket. She knew the way his shoulders curved when he was relaxed. She knew exactly how he held a person's face when he kissed them, because he used to kiss her, just like that. She was literally on the verge of exploding through that office door, ready to march across those 30 feet and detonate a bomb of pure fury on both of them. Her hand was on the doorknob, her whole world shrinking down to this one point of white-hot rage when a firm but gentle hand landed on her shoulder. Brittany whipped around, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest, and found herself staring at a face from her past. It was Detective Sarah Evans, an old friend from high school, dressed in street clothes with her badge clipped discreetly to her belt. Sarah's eyes were calm but serious, and they carried a weight that just stopped Brittany dead in her tracks. "Wait," Sarah said, her voice a low, steady whisper that cut right through the noise in Brittany's head. "Don't go out there. Not yet. I have a feeling there's something much, much bigger going on here." Her hand was like an anchor, keeping Brittany from getting swept away by the tidal wave of her own emotions. Tears she didn't even know were there started streaming down her face as she stared at her old friend, shaking from head to toe. "Sarah, how did you?" Her voice was just this broken, barely there sound. "I was getting coffee," Sarah explained, pointing to a half-empty mug on the counter. "I come in sometimes on my day off. I saw him walk in 20 minutes ago. I saw the kiss. Then I saw your face in the window, and I knew exactly what was about to happen." She gave Brittany's shoulder a squeeze. "If you go out there now, a complete wreck, you'll just tip him off. You'll give him the chance to cover up whatever he's really up to. I've seen it 100 times," Sarah went on, her voice firm. "A guy brazen enough to pull this in his wife's own restaurant is usually hiding something a hell of a lot worse. You need to find out what that is." "What do I do?" Brittany whispered, her voice cracking. Sarah's expression softened. Go home. Go home right now while he thinks you're still here working. Go through everything: his office, his laptop, his phone records. Find the proof. Document every single thing. Take pictures, download files, make copies, and then you call me. She pulled a card from her pocket and pressed it into Brittany's shaking hand. Confront him now, and he'll just deny everything. He'll flip it around on you, call you crazy. He will erase every single track before you even know what to look for. Don't you dare let him have that power. Brittany glanced back through the window. Jake was already getting up, tossing a $20 bill on the table. The red-haired woman was already gone. Sarah was right. Making a scene would get her nothing but gaslighting and more heartbreak. But a quiet investigation, while he thought she was clueless, that might just get her the truth. Okay, she breathed out. Okay. Sarah gave her one last squeeze on the shoulder. Be smart, Brittany. The second Jake walked out the front door at 9:52 a.m., Brittany grabbed her coat. Her hands were shaking so bad she could barely get the key in the ignition. She didn't say a word to her staff, didn't turn off the stove, didn't even untie her damn apron as she ran out the back into the cold drizzle. The 12-minute drive home took her 8. When she pulled into their driveway, his car was already there. She walked into a house that was dead silent and looked disgustingly normal. The photos on the wall, the damn pillows on the couch. It was all a lie. Nothing was normal anymore. She walked straight to Jake's home office. The door was slightly open. And sitting on his desk was a neat stack of papers. The page on top was a petition for dissolution of marriage, already filled out and signed by Jake Miller in big, bold blue ink. The only thing it was missing was her signature. The next paper was a professional valuation of her restaurant, the Copper Pot, appraised at $2.8 million. Then she found the emails. One was from a Connor Blackwood at Summit Hospitality Group, sent months ago. Jake, it said, we are ready to close on the $2.8 million offer as soon as you have power of attorney. Make sure she's emotionally weak enough to sign. Another email laid out the plan to wire the money to an offshore account after the sale. A more recent one confirmed the strategy. The contact with red hair will assist with the emotional angle. She is fully on board. But it was the last document, a screenshot of a text chain at the bottom of the pile that made her blood run cold. The contact name was Jessica. The woman with the red hair was Brittany's own sister. The story I pieced together about Jake starts on what should have been a celebration. February 14th, 2024. But inside his own house, his wife, Brittany, had been sitting for 3 hours just staring at a stack of divorce papers. Jake wasn't there. His car was gone. And the silence in that house was absolutely deafening. Sources close to them say he was with her sister, Jessica. The proof was a text thread on a phone, left screen up on a table like a confession. Brittany apparently read those messages over and over, the words just blurring together, praying that she was wrong, that it was some other Jessica, but it wasn't. The area code was local, and the contact picture was from a family Christmas party they had all been to. It was her, Jessica, the little sister Brittany had practically raised, the one she'd protected her whole life. She was left trying to figure out how a betrayal this deep, this calculated could have ever happened. So, from what we understand, Brittany steps into Jake's home office. His work laptop was sitting on the desk, closed. For years, he'd sold her this story that it was just boring work stuff, spreadsheets she'd never care about. And for all those years, she'd bought it. She'd believed every single word. But that trust was gone now, replaced by this cold fury that actually steadied her trembling hands. She reached over and flipped open the laptop. The screen lit up, asking for a password. She typed in the one she'd seen him use for literally everything. And the password? Brittany, 2022. The year he promised to love her forever. The desktop appeared. Everything was perfectly organized: work, taxes, personal files. She navigated to his email, and as the inbox loaded, Jake's entire deception started to bleed out onto the screen. An email from a Connor Vance at Cascade Dining Group was the first domino to fall. The subject line was about a finalization timeline. It was dated 4 months earlier, October 10th, and it said, Jake, once you have power of attorney over Brittany's kitchen, we can close in 72 hours. The $2.8 million is ready to wire. A follow-up from November 3rd was even more disturbing. It mentioned an updated timeline and gave Jake a horrific instruction. Make sure she's weak enough to sign before the deadline. Emotional strain, health issues, whatever it takes, the red-haired contact will handle the emotional part. Another email, this one from January, laid it all out. The contact, a woman named Chloe, had agreed to the whole thing. Brittany would be kept in a vulnerable state until the power of attorney was signed. After that, $2.8 million would hit Jake's offshore account. The last line of that email was a complete gut punch. You're free to start fresh with A in Seattle. Ashley's Table opens Q3, 2024. They were stealing her family's restaurant and renaming it after her own sister, the one Jake promised they'd build together. Her search then took her to a personal folder simply labeled A. Inside were dozens of photos of Jake and Ashley together in Seattle, at Cannon Beach, the very place Jake had proposed to Brittany, and at some hotel bar. His lips pressed against her neck. Timestamps on the pictures went back 18 months. This betrayal had been going on for a year and a half. We're told she then opened his text messages, finding the thread with Ashley. The most recent texts from the night before were just chilling. Ashley asked if Jake was really going through with anniversary plans with Brittany, and Jake's reply was brutally clear. He was going to keep Brittany calm because by October, it would all finally be over. You and me, Ashley's Table, and a baby, he texted. I want a baby with you. The shock was so physical, my source says she just slammed the laptop shut, the desk rattling from the impact. This was a betrayal on every conceivable level. Ashley wanted the life Brittany had built, and Jake had been the master architect of the entire theft. He was promising one sister a brand new future while he systematically destroyed the others, all to finance his new life. But it was that one phrase from Connor Vance's email that kept replaying in her head. Health issues. Whatever it takes. Because for months, starting in November, Brittany had been suffering from constant nausea, exhaustion, and stomach pain. She had just figured it was burnout. The sickening possibility that this wasn't stress sent her running to the bathroom. And there, sitting inside Jake's unzipped toiletries bag, she found the exact reason she'd been so sick. Tucked right next to his razor was a small brown bottle. The label read, Ipecac syrup for inducing vomiting. It was half gone. Our investigation confirms Jake had been actively poisoning his wife. He wasn't trying to murder her, just break her down. He was making her so sick and so desperate that she would sign away her entire legacy without a fight. It was a cold, cruel, calculated plan. She walked back to the office, bottle in hand, and opened the laptop one more time. His internet search history was the final piece of the puzzle. Searches from 3 months prior showed just how premeditated this was. How to Induce Nausea Without Detection. Power of Attorney Requirements, Oregon. He'd researched every detail, and Ashley, her own sister, was his accomplice. As she stood there by the window watching the rain, the shock finally melted away into a cold, sharp focus. Jake and Ashley thought they had her trapped, but they had made one critical mistake. They thought she was weak. Now she knew the truth. And as her grandmother always said, knowledge is the sharpest knife in the kitchen. Brittany's first step was to get undeniable proof of what Jake was putting in her coffee every single morning. She didn't sleep a wink that night. How could you? Lying next to the man who smiled at you while he was poisoning you. He got home late, past 11, and undressed in the dark. She just pretended to be asleep, keeping her breathing deep and even. She had to fight the urge to scream, to just confront him with the bottle. But she knew that to stop a monster like Jake, she had to be smarter. She needed cold, hard proof. So, the next morning, she went through the motions. She got up, pulled her hair back, and walked into the kitchen as if nothing was wrong. Jake was already in there, standing by the counter, the coffee maker hissing beside him. He turned and gave her that same damn easy smile she had fallen in love with 5 years before. "Morning, babe," he said, his voice so casual it was sickening. It took every ounce of her self-control to say, "Morning" back, her voice steady, betraying nothing. From the doorway, she watched him pour the coffee into their 2 matching mugs. He turned to the refrigerator to get the almond milk. As his back was turned, his other hand slipped into the pocket of his sweatpants. For a split second, he pulled out the small brown vial she discovered. Her stomach clenched into a fist, but she remained perfectly still. He unscrewed the cap and, with a quick, subtle tilt, let a few clear drops fall into her mug before pocketing it and turning back around. The whole act took less than 5 seconds, a moment so fast it would have been missed by anyone not looking for it. We're told he would stir both mugs with the very same spoon, the sound of metal on ceramic a soft domestic lie. Then he'd walk over to Brittany, his wife, holding out her coffee with that same practiced smile. "Here you go, babe," Jake would say. "Extra almond milk, just how you like it." She told me she'd take the mug, her fingers brushing his. Brittany's hands, she insisted, didn't tremble. She wouldn't let them. "Thanks," she'd reply, bringing the mug to her mouth in a perfect performance of taking a sip. But the smell gave it away. Under the coffee was something else, something deeply wrong and chemical. She let the liquid barely touch her lips before lowering the mug. "Perfect," she lied. Across the room, Jake would lean against the counter, sipping his own coffee, probably texting Ashley, her sister, to plan their future. She watched him from over the rim of her cup, faking each sip, and felt a cold resolve settle deep in her gut. This man, the one she had built her life with, the person she had trusted with every part of her being, had been systematically poisoning her every morning for 3 months. Her mind went back to November. That's when the sickness had begun. The constant nausea, the bone-crushing fatigue, the cramps that would double her over. It got so bad she'd have to stop in the middle of a dinner service at her restaurant, hunched over, fighting the urge to be sick in front of a room full of people. She thought it was an illness, maybe a lingering bug or an ulcer from all the stress. She went to her doctor twice. They ran every test they could think of and found nothing. It was probably just anxiety, they told her, all while Jake was the one making her weak. Jake's voice, she remembered, would snap her out of these thoughts. He was looking at her then, his head tilted, a look of manufactured concern on his face. It was all a performance. "You look tired," he'd say. "I'm fine," she'd answer. "Just didn't sleep well." "You've been saying that a lot lately," he'd push, setting his mug down. He would then step closer, his hand reaching out to brush a stray piece of hair from her face. His touch, she told us, made her skin crawl. "Maybe you should take a day off," he'd suggest. "Let Jessica handle the restaurant. You need to rest." Rest, she thought, so she'd be weaker, so she'd be easier to break. "Maybe," she'd say, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "I'll think about it." He'd then kiss her forehead, a soft gesture that felt like a sick joke. "I love you, Brittany," he'd whisper. And for a fleeting, awful second, she almost believed him. Almost. Then he grabbed his keys from the counter and walked to the door. "I've got an early meeting. I'll see you tonight." "Okay," she replied, her voice solid. The door clicked shut. She waited, listening until the sound of his car disappeared down the street. Then she moved. From a cabinet, she grabbed a small glass jar, one she used for spices, and poured every last drop of her coffee into it. She screwed the lid on tight, carefully wiped the jar clean, and buried it deep in her purse. The rest of Jake's coffee was poured down the sink. She rinsed both of their mugs and put them in the dishwasher, erasing all evidence of the morning's crime. For a moment, she just stood there, gripping the cold granite counter, her breathing ragged. Now her hands were shaking. It wasn't from fear anymore. It was from pure rage. So, this story kicks off after 3 solid months of absolute hell. For 90 straight days, his wife, Brittany, had been playing this twisted game. And Jake? He was totally oblivious, but the fog was finally starting to clear. He was seeing things for what they were, and he was about to prove everything. He grabs his phone, his hands probably shaking, and starts Googling medical labs nearby. He finds one, Providence Medical, good reviews, opens at 8, it's close. He shoots a quick text to his manager, Connor. "Hey man, can you open the roost today? Got a doctor's appointment, should be in by noon." The response pings back almost instantly. "You got it, boss. Everything okay?" Jake just stares at the screen. No, man, nothing was okay. But he was about to take the first step to fix it. "Yeah," he types back. "Just a checkup." It's a total lie. He pockets the phone, grabs the thermos with the coffee sample, and walks out the door. Because if Brittany was actually poisoning him, he had to know what she was using. More than that, he needed cold, hard proof. The kind of undeniable evidence that would hold up in a court of law. Because, as he told me, this was about more than just him now. This was about the roost, the legacy his grandfather had built from the ground up. Everything that Brittany and her sister Ashley were trying to dismantle. He wasn't going to let them take it. So on Friday, February 16th, a little after 10:15 in the morning, he pulls his truck into the parking lot of that lab. He described just sitting there in his truck for 5 minutes with the engine off, his hands clenched around the steering wheel like he was trying to choke it. He was just staring at the clinic's glass doors, thinking they might just swallow him whole. And on the passenger seat, tucked inside an old gym bag, was the thermos with yesterday's coffee. The coffee Brittany had made for him. The coffee he had finally seen her mess with. He'd told his manager, Connor, some cover story about meeting a new supplier across town. And Connor, loyal as they come, didn't ask a single question, just said, "Take your time, boss." And that simple act of trust, Jake told me, was like a knife in his gut. He was running on empty after another sleepless night, spent lying in bed next to Brittany, listening to her breathe so evenly, wondering how a person could sleep that soundly after such a monstrous betrayal, after scheming with her own sister to tear his life apart, after 3 months of slowly, methodically poisoning him every single morning. And get this, she had made him coffee again that morning, going through the exact same motions, giving him the same sweet smile, the same kiss before she left for her yoga class. He hadn't touched a drop. The second her car was out of the driveway, he poured the whole thing right down the sink. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, that familiar wave of sickness didn't hit him by 9 a.m. There were no cramps, no dizzy spells, nothing. That was the moment he knew. With chilling certainty, it was the coffee. It had always been the coffee. He grabs his gym bag, takes a shaky breath, and pushes his truck door open. The air was that damp, cold Portland air that just gets into your bones. He walks through the automatic doors into a waiting room that felt cold and impersonal. The air smelled like a weird mix of antiseptic and some cheap air freshener, and it made his stomach clench. A receptionist looks up, a polite smile fixed on her face. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Jake kept his voice low and even. "I need to get a toxicology test done," he said, "on a beverage sample." You could see the woman's professional smile flicker for just a second. "One moment, please." She picks up a phone, murmurs into it, and then nods. "Dr. Evans will be with you shortly. Please have a seat." Jake found a plastic chair by the window, the gym bag feeling like it was filled with lead. He watched the other patients sitting there in silence. An older man with a cane, a young woman lost in her phone, a mom trying to quiet a fussy kid. They were all just normal people, living their normal lives, and he couldn't help but wonder if any of them were there because their wife was trying to murder them. He figured, probably not. After what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes, a door opened and a woman in a white lab coat appeared. She looked to be in her early 40s, hair pulled back, with these warm, intelligent eyes. "Jake?" she called out. He stood. "That's me." "I'm Dr. Rachel Evans," she said, shaking his hand. Her handshake was firm, all business. "Come on back." Jake followed her down a narrow hall into a small office, where she pointed to a chair for him to sit. Dr. Evans closed the door and sat across from him. "So," she began gently, "the receptionist tells me you have a beverage you'd like us to screen. Can you tell me a little more about what's going on?" Jake reached into his bag, pulled out the thermos, and placed it on the desk between them. "I need you to tell me if there's anything in this," Jake said, his voice quiet but steady. "Anything at all that's not supposed to be there? Poison? Drugs? Anything?" Dr. Evans picked up the thermos, unscrewing the top to look inside. "And where did the sample come from?" she asked. Jake hesitated for just a second. "My wife made it for me yesterday morning." The doctor's eyes met his, and a heavy, unspoken understanding filled that little room. "And you're concerned because—" Dr. Evans prompted. "Because I've been sick," Jake explained, the words just pouring out of him now. "For 3 months. Nauseous, exhausted, horrible stomach cramps. My doctor ran all kinds of tests, couldn't find a thing. But yesterday, I didn't drink the coffee she made me, and today I feel fine. No symptoms. None." Dr. Evans set the thermos down with deliberate care. Her face was calm, but he could see the concern in her eyes. "Jake, I have to ask you," she said, her voice gentle but serious. "Do you feel safe at home?" The question just hung in the air. Not anymore, he admitted. But I can't do anything until I have proof. Real, legal proof. That's why I'm here. The doctor nodded slowly, her gaze locked on his. Okay, I understand. We can run a comprehensive toxicology panel on this. We'll screen for common poisons, prescription medications, over-the-counter drugs, you name it. Jake asked, "How long is that going to take?" 72 hours, she replied. "We'll call you the second we have the results." And then he asked the big question, "And it'll hold up in court if it comes to that?" "If you decide to take legal action, yes. Our lab is CLIA certified, which means our results are admissible in court." Dr. Evans paused. "But Jake, if you are in any immediate danger—" "I'm not," he cut in. "Not yet. She doesn't know that I know. I have to keep it that way until I have everything I need to stop her." Dr. Evans studied him for a long moment, then just gave a firm nod. "All right," she said. "The test is $127.50. We can bill your insurance if you like." "No," Jake interrupted, pulling out his wallet. He found an old emergency credit card his dad had given him years ago. "I'll pay with this. Just please, don't put anything through my insurance." Dr. Evans didn't ask why. She simply took the card, ran the payment, and handed him a receipt. "We'll call you Monday afternoon," she told him. "If you need anything before then, if you start to feel unsafe, you call 911, or you call me." She handed Jake her business card. He took it, sliding it into his wallet. "Thank you," he said, and he told me he'd never meant 2 words more in his life. Dr. Evans walked him back to the waiting room, and just before he left, she placed a hand on his shoulder in a quiet show of support. His story really starts right there, with that quiet warning from a doctor. Jake walked back to his truck, the chill on his skin doing nothing to cool the fire inside him. He told me he just sat there for a while, his breath catching, his hands trembling. The wait was almost over. 72 hours, 3 days. By Monday, he would know what Brittany had been putting in his coffee, and that proof would be his first step toward freedom. He started the truck, pulling away from the lab and heading toward the restaurant, the Roost. And on the drive, it really hit him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt good. The fog in his brain had vanished. The nausea was gone. He felt like himself again, and that clarity was almost as horrifying as the sickness, because it meant Brittany's plan had been working. She had been systematically taking him apart, piece by agonizing piece, and he hadn't even seen it. But he saw it all now. 72 more hours, and he would have the confirmation he needed that his own wife was poisoning him. Then he would know exactly what to do. And so it was. Monday afternoon, February 19th, when his phone started buzzing in his pocket while he was in the kitchen prepping for the dinner rush. He dried his hands, pulled out his phone, and saw an unknown number with a Portland area code. A knot of pure dread tightened in his gut. Stepping into the small back office for some privacy, he answered. It was a Dr. Sarah Miller from the lab, and her voice, while professional, had this edge of urgency to it. She told Jake he needed to come to the clinic immediately, that the results were something they had to discuss face to face. A cold wave washed over him. He had to ask, "Did you find something?" The doctor's quiet yes was all the confirmation he needed. "I think you'll want to see this as soon as possible," she added. Jake told Connor he had to leave, grabbed his keys, and was back in his truck, running on pure autopilot. The drive was only 12 minutes long, but for Jake, it was the longest 12 minutes of his entire life. All right, so tonight's story comes from a listener named Jake, and this one is heavy. Picture this. Jake's driving, his hands strangling the steering wheel, on his way to a doctor's clinic. His heart is just hammering his ribs because he's finally, after months of hell, about to get some answers. Dr. Peterson is waiting for him in that same quiet room. He gestures for Jake to sit, and then he closes the door, sealing them off from the world. There's a single manila folder on the desk. That's it. The doctor opens it and just slides a lab report across the table. He says, "Jake, we have the results. I had to run these multiple times because, honestly, what we found is deeply disturbing." Jake tells me his eyes just zeroed in on that piece of paper. It's all medical jargon, but one line, highlighted in bright yellow, just screams at him, "Ipecac syrup detected. 15 milliliters per 250 milliliter sample." The words go blurry. He has to blink to bring them back. "Ipecac," he says, and the name feels like poison on his tongue. That's for making you throw up, right? Exactly, Dr. Peterson tells him. It's an emetic. They don't really use it anymore because it's so easy to abuse. At this concentration, 15 milliliters in something like a daily cup of coffee, it wouldn't kill you outright. But over time, it would cause chronic nausea, exhaustion, severe stomach pain. Jake just looks at him, his mind trying to catch up. "For how long?" Jake asks, and you can just imagine the dread in his voice. The doctor's face is stone cold. Given daily for months, you'd see major cumulative damage, dehydration, muscle atrophy, serious harm to your digestive tract. He lets that hang in the air for a second. "Jake, someone has been methodically poisoning you for what looks like at least the last 3 months." The room literally feels like it's tilting. Jake has to grab the desk to steady himself. 3 months. That's when it all started. The sickness, the bone-deep fatigue he couldn't shake. He thought it was his health, stress, anything but this. It was her, it was his wife, Brittany. For 90 straight days, she had smiled at him, kissed him, and handed him a cup of poison. Dr. Peterson leans in, his voice urgent. "You have to take this to the police, now. This is a crime. This is aggravated assault, maybe even attempted murder. You are not safe." But Jake just shakes his head. "I can't," he says, his voice barely a whisper but totally firm. "Why in God's name not?" the doctor asks, completely floored. "Because this," Jake says, pointing at the report, "isn't enough." He knew he needed more. He had to see the whole twisted picture. "If I go to the cops now," Jake explains, "she'll just deny everything. She'll say I'm setting her up. She has the money, the connections. She'll paint me as the crazy one. She's already been trying to take everything from me as it is." And you can just feel Dr. Peterson's concern hardening into fear for him. "If she's capable of this," the doctor warns, "she could do worse. You're in real danger here, Jake." "I know," Jake tells him. "But I haven't had her coffee in 4 days. She has no clue that I'm on to her. I have to hold on to that advantage until I have enough to bury her with this." The doctor just studies him for a long moment, then gives this slow, pained nod. "Okay," he says, "but you promise me you'll call 911 if you feel even remotely threatened, or call me." He scribbles his personal cell number on a card. "Anytime." Jake takes the card and the lab report, the two most important pieces of paper in his life, and tucks them away. "Thank you for everything, Doc." As he's leaving, The doctor grabs his shoulder. "Be careful, Jake," he says. Back in his truck, that lab report feels like it weighs a ton. It's the physical proof of Brittany's monstrous betrayal. She was systematically breaking him down, poisoning him, trying to make him weak enough to sign away his grandfather's restaurant. An email he'd found from her associate, Caleb Vance, flashed in his mind. Make sure he's weak enough to sign. She took that literally. For 3 months, she'd looked him right in the eye while slowly killing him. He just sits there, staring out the windshield, numb. The anger that's been brewing inside him for weeks suddenly cools, sharpens into something like steel. Brittany thought she'd already won. She thought she'd broken him. She was so wrong. He had proof, official, documented, lab-certified proof. And that one piece of paper changed the entire game. He turns the key, the engine roaring to life as a plan starts forming. Brittany didn't just want the restaurant. She wanted him erased. And his own brother-in-law, Connor, was in on it. But they made one fatal mistake. They had no idea who they were messing with. They thought he'd be too sick, too tired, too defeated to fight back. They never dreamed he'd find that little bottle she'd hidden. They never thought he'd be smart enough to get the coffee tested. And they damn sure had no idea that his grandfather had left him a contingency plan, something put in place years ago as a fail-safe. Samuel didn't just leave him a restaurant. He left him an escape hatch. It was a secret weapon, something Brittany and Connor and Caleb Vance knew nothing about. Something Jake hadn't even dared to look at in 5 years. But tonight felt different. Brittany set out to destroy him, but what she was about to find out is that she only made him stronger. By the time she realized it, it would be far too late. It was Tuesday, February 20th, and he was standing in the doorway of his grandfather's old study. He hadn't been in here much since Samuel passed 5 years ago. The house was dead quiet. Brittany had texted him about working late. A pathetic lie. He knew she was with Connor. It didn't matter anymore. He'd come to this room looking for something, a connection to the man who raised him. The air still had that faint smell of old books and cedar. The walls were covered in old photos. The restaurant in its early days, just a small spot on Division Street. His grandfather, covered in flour, smiling that huge smile, and a little Jake, perched on a stool, learning the ropes at his side. The grief hit him like a physical blow. God, he missed him. Samuel would have known exactly what to do. He always did. Jake walked over to an old wooden desk, a piece his grandfather had restored himself back in 1979. And on it sat Samuel's old business ledger. This wasn't for show. This was the real history, a leather-bound journal filled with 45 years of blood, sweat, and tears. The cover was worn soft from decades of use. Every one of his grandfather's deals and dreams recorded in his sharp, decisive handwriting. Jake had looked through it 1,000 times, but actually using his grandfather's wisdom felt like admitting he was really gone, a finality he just wasn't ready for. But tonight was different. He reached for the ledger, needing to feel his grandfather's strength, to remember the kind of man he came from. He lifted the journal, the weight of it so familiar in his hands, and sat on the old leather chair. The book was worn, the stitching along the spine starting to give. As he turned it over in his hands, a corner of the leather cover caught on his sleeve. He heard a faint ripping sound that made his heart stop. But when he looked closer, he saw it. The leather had pulled away from the inside of the cover, and there was something underneath. It wasn't cardboard. It was paper. With his fingers shaking, he peeled back the rest of the flap. Tucked inside a hidden compartment, right against the spine, were 3 folded pieces of paper. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely pull them out. The first was a letter, written in his grandfather's iconic blue ink. He unfolded it, holding his breath, and started reading the words his grandfather had left only for him. My dearest grandson Jake, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. It was a message from beyond the grave, a warning. His grandfather, Samuel, had always known this could happen. He and his wife poured their souls into that business, and he knew that kind of success could make people greedy, even people you're supposed to trust. So he set a trap, a final insurance policy to protect his grandson long after he was gone. And the key to it all was a trust fund, holding $850,000. It was sitting in an account at Wells Fargo Bank, listed under Samuel's name but controlled by his lawyer of 40 years, a man named Arthur Cole. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was Samuel's most trusted friend. But there was a catch, one single condition that had to be met to release the money. And if Jake was reading that letter, Samuel wrote, it meant he now held the very thing needed to spring that trap. The instructions were crystal clear. Call Arthur. Show him the proof of betrayal. He would handle the rest. This money, Samuel explained, was Jake's war chest. His ammunition to defend himself, to save the restaurant, and to finally bring the hammer down on anyone who tried to take what was his. Jake told me the letter blurred as he read it, tears just streaming down his face. His grandfather knew. He saw this betrayal coming. He made sure Jake wouldn't have to face this nightmare alone. Even from the grave, Samuel was still protecting him. Jake wiped his eyes, his hand shaking as he picked up the next piece of paper. The first was an official Wells Fargo bank certificate, dated over a decade ago, in January of 2015. It detailed the Samuel Miller Family Trust Fund, principal, $850,000. The second was a business card. Arthur Cole, attorney at law, Cole and Associates. A phone number was printed right below his name. He just sat there, holding the keys to his survival. All right, let's talk about the number, $850,000. That's enough cash to hire the sharpest lawyers in the city, enough to absolutely bury Ryan and his snake of a partner, Connor Blackwood. It was the key to saving the restaurant her grandma Eleanor built. But more than that, it was a final message from the woman who raised her. It was proof of a faith that never wavered. And in that moment, something inside Madison just hardened. She folded those documents with this newfound calm and stared out at the city lights. She knew that somewhere out there, her husband Ryan was with Brittany, so sure of himself, so convinced he'd already broken her. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Her grandmother had just handed her a loaded gun. Now, it was time to pull the trigger. The plan was simple. Tomorrow, she calls Andrew Bennett. She would show him every sick detail, the poison report, the emails, the signature that wasn't hers. On Wednesday afternoon, February 21st, Madison walked through the doors of that law firm, ready for battle. The law office was straight out of an old movie. Pre-war brick, high ceilings, the smell of old books and leather. A receptionist with silver hair smiled as Madison walked in. "You must be Madison," she said, her voice kind. "Mr. Bennett's waiting for you." She led her down a hall that felt like a museum of a city that was long gone. She'd made the call that morning, her voice barely a whisper. She told them who she was, that Eleanor Vance was her grandmother, and that she had to see Andrew Bennett now. Just like that, an appointment was booked for 3 p.m., and there she stood, gripping her purse with a single manila envelope holding all the proof she needed. The receptionist stopped at a heavy door with a brass plate. Andrew Bennett, Esquire. She knocked once, then opened it. "Madison Carson is here," she announced. A calm, steady voice answered, "Send her in." As Madison stepped inside, the man was already moving from behind his desk to meet her. Andrew Bennett looked exactly like you'd picture. Mid-60s, perfect silver hair, gold wire-rimmed glasses, and a gray suit that looked like it had seen and won 1,000 battles. He held out his hand. "Madison," he said, and the way he said her name, like family, it just twisted a knot in her throat. "Please sit down." She fell into a soft leather chair across from him. He just watched her for a second with these incredibly kind eyes. "You have her fire," he said softly. "Your grandmother's? It's in your eyes." Madison had to fight not to break down right there. "You knew her well," was all she could manage. "For 40 years," he said. "My client and my friend." He told her stories about Eleanor, about how proud she was of Madison. Then his face got serious. He confirmed everything. 10 years ago, Eleanor had set up that $850,000 trust with one unbreakable rule. No one, not even Madison, was to know about it unless the restaurant was in danger. Madison just nodded, numb. "It is." She slid the manila envelope across the massive wooden desk. Andrew opened it, and she watched his face change as he read. His jaw tightened at Eleanor's letter. His eyes went wide at the lab report detailing the poison. Then he saw the forged signature on the divorce papers. He finished with the emails from Connor Blackwood, his expression growing colder with every line. When he was done, he stacked the papers neatly and looked right at her. His voice was quiet, but it was filled with this chilling rage. "Madison," he said, "this isn't just a business dispute. This is attempted murder." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm here." Andrew leaned in, his focus like a laser. "You've got me," he told her, "and you still have Eleanor fighting for you. She knew something like this could happen. That's why she set up the trust." He tapped the pile of evidence. "And this? This is everything we need. It's clean, it's documented, and it's damning." For the first time in months, Madison felt like she could actually breathe. "So, I can get the money?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "But we have to be fast. I'm filing an emergency petition today. We're asking a judge for a temporary restraining order to freeze every single marital asset. That stops Ryan from touching the restaurant. Next," he went on, "we demand the trust be activated immediately. And third, we petition for a full-blown criminal investigation into Ryan Carson for forgery, fraud, and poisoning." Madison's heart was pounding. She asked how fast this could all happen. "With proof this solid," he said, "a judge could rule in 48 hours. If the judge sided with them, Ryan would be legally cut off from the restaurant, and Madison would have the full $850,000 to fight him." But Andrew's face was still serious. "The poisoning," he said, "that's a whole different beast. The court can start a criminal case, but you need to go to the police yourself. Do you have someone you can trust?" he asked her. And right away, she thought of an old friend from high school, Detective Kate Miller. She hadn't made that call yet, but she knew she had to. "I do," Madison said. Andrew nodded. "Good. Because the second we file this, Ryan's going to know he's caught. And a cornered man is a dangerous man." He knew she couldn't do this alone. As Madison got up to leave, he put a hand on her shoulder, and it felt so much like something her grandma would do that it hurt. "Eleanor loved you more than anything," he told her. She would be so damn proud of you right now." And just like that, the tears she'd been bottling up finally started to fall. "I know," he said, his voice gentle, "but she's right here with you, in this fight that you are about to win." Madison walked out of that office an hour later with the petition filed and a court date for Friday, February 23rd. Driving away, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long, long time: hope. Her grandmother had given her the armor. Andrew had just handed her the sword. But Ryan was still walking free, and she needed someone to make sure he ended up in a cage. She pulled out her phone, found the contact, and hit dial. It was time to call in Detective Kate Miller. On Saturday morning, February 24th, just past 11 a.m., Madison found a corner booth at a downtown coffee shop. She was waiting for the detective, sipping a black coffee that tasted like the beginning of justice. It had been 10 days since Detective Kate Miller had literally held Madison back from attacking Ryan and her sister. But now, things were different. The day before, a judge had granted everything. Ryan was legally locked out of his own life, and her grandmother's money was finally in her hands. But a restraining order wasn't enough, not even close. Madison wanted to see Ryan behind bars. That's why she'd called Kate. At 11:15, the detective walked in, wearing jeans, a leather jacket, her badge right there on her belt. She scanned the room with the kind of calm that only comes from seeing the worst in people. Kate saw Madison and slid into the booth. "Madison," she said, keeping her voice down. "How are you doing?" Madison looked her right in the eye. "I'm doing okay because of you," she said. "If you hadn't stopped me that day, I'd have nothing. So, thank you." Kate just gave a slight nod. "I'm glad I was there. Now, what do you have for me?" Madison pushed a thick folder across the table. What Madison laid out was so much darker than an affair. Her husband, Ryan, had been poisoning her for 3 months. It was a cold, sick plot he cooked up with a developer named Connor Blackwood to steal her restaurant. But the rot went even deeper. I watched Detective Miller's face go from concerned friend to stone-cold cop as she opened that file. Her eyes widened, I'm told, when she saw the toxicology report. Her jaw set hard as she read the emails between Ryan and Connor, her expression getting darker by the second. The first page showed her coffee contained 15 milliliters of ipecac syrup, enough to make a person chronically, violently ill. "Jesus Christ," Miller muttered under her breath. "He was poisoning you for how long?" she asked. 3 months. Every single morning from November to February, Ryan made her coffee, lacing it with poison. Madison thought she had some mystery illness the doctors couldn't solve, but it was him, all along, making her weaker and weaker, getting her ready for the final takedown. Detective Miller flipped to the emails, reading the words Madison said were now burned into her brain. "All right, so get this. The message is cold, calculated. Make sure she's weak enough to sign before October 28th. Then another text from his buddy, Jake. The Ipecac is working, she's losing weight and barely has energy. And the real kicker. Once the PA is signed, we'll wire the $2.8 million to your offshore account." Detective Evans just stared at the printouts, her face hardening. "This is attempted murder," she said, her voice low. "Poisoning someone to force their hand is aggravated assault. Easy." "We could be looking at attempted homicide," she goes on, tapping Jake Brennan's name on the email header. "And Jake is going down as an accessory. Conspiracy, financial exploitation. We're talking serious prison time." Brittany, the wife at the center of this nightmare, just says, there's more, and pulls out a forged divorce petition, a business valuation claiming a $2.8 million price tag, and fake fertility clinic papers her husband, Connor, had shown her own sister, Ashley, who he was sleeping with, by the way, despite the vasectomy he'd had 5 years earlier. To top it all off, she lays down a stack of photos from a PI showing Connor and Ashley getting cozy at the Marriott, at fancy restaurants, all the way out at Cannon Beach. Detective Evans went through everything piece by piece, taking careful notes. After a long minute, she lets out a heavy breath. In 10 years on the force, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of domestic abuse and outright fraud I have ever seen, she confessed. We have toxicology, we have emails, financial trails, forged documents, photos. She finally looks up at Brittany. Do you want me to go arrest Connor right now? And Brittany, unbelievably, shook her head no. She told the detective what her own lawyer had said. The evidence was damning, but it was still circumstantial. Yeah, the lab found ipecac in her coffee, but they couldn't prove Connor put it there. The emails proved Jake wanted her restaurant, but they couldn't prove Connor was actively poisoning her to get it. If they arrested him now, his lawyer would just scream reasonable doubt. Brittany leaned in, her voice steady. I need direct evidence, she insisted. Video of Connor putting something in my coffee, audio of him admitting it. I need to catch him in the act. Something a jury can't twist. Detective Evans just nodded, understanding completely. So, we set a trap. The detective laid it out. We install hidden cameras all over your house. The kitchen is a must, anywhere he makes food or coffee. And because Oregon is a one-party consent state, Brittany could legally record him without him knowing a thing, especially inside their own home. Get him comfortable, Evans urged her. Ask him questions, the right kind of questions, that make him drop his guard and confess to what he's been doing. You could see Brittany's jaw clench. And what about Jake and my sister? She asked, her voice tight. We follow them, Evans advised. We document every meeting. If you can get Connor, Jake, and Ashley together on tape discussing this whole scheme, that's a conspiracy charge. 3 people coordinating a felony. And that's a sure thing, right? Brittany pushed. Detective Evans gave her hand a firm squeeze, her eyes intense. We are going to nail him, Brittany. I promise you that, the detective said. But you have to be so smart and so patient. If Connor gets a whiff that you're onto him before we have something undeniable, he could escalate. Poisoning you was already a huge step. If he starts to panic, God knows what he'll do next. She then pulled out a business card, flipping it over to jot down a second number. That's my personal cell, she explained. If anything feels off, if you feel unsafe for a second, if Connor threatens you or things just go south, you call 911 first. Then you call me. I don't care if it's day or night. You got that? Brittany took the card, her hand trembling just a bit, and nodded. Got it. Thank you, Detective. Evans offered a small, reassuring smile. You're a hell of a lot stronger than you think, but I'm glad to be in your corner. She stood up, collecting the evidence into a folder. I'm going to run full background checks on Jake Brennan and start digging into his financial ties to Connor, Evans said, outlining the plan. You go buy those cameras, get them set up, and you record everything. We are building an airtight case. When we are done, Connor will be spending a very, very long time behind bars. As Brittany watched her leave, she later told me that for the first time since her entire life had imploded, she felt a tiny spark of something that wasn't despair. It felt like hope. So, fast forward. It's Wednesday night, February 28th, almost 10 o'clock. Brittany is sitting on her bed, laptop open, headphones clamped on, watching the live feed from a tiny spy camera she had planted 4 days ago. The camera was smaller than a tube of lipstick, hidden perfectly inside a picture frame on Connor's desk. A photo of them from their wedding day, the two of them smiling like they actually meant forever. She'd found it on Amazon for $89, got it with 2-day shipping. The little thing recorded crystal clear video and audio, uploading everything to a secure cloud server that Connor had no idea existed. Detective Evans had said, "Document everything." So that's what she did. Every single night after Connor was asleep, she'd comb through hours of footage, fast forwarding through him just sitting there, typing on his computer, scrolling on his phone. It was almost all garbage. But that night, she caught something. The timestamp on the video was from the day before, February 27th, 2024, at 2:47 in the afternoon. At that exact time, Brittany had been at her restaurant, Rose's Kitchen, prepping for dinner service. Connor was home alone in his office, phone glued to his ear. Brittany cranked the volume, and his voice came through sharp and clear. "Mike, it's Connor. Yeah, we met at that contractors event in Beaverton last month," he said into the phone. There's a pause, and then you can hear a guy's muffled voice on the other end. "Yeah, I remember you. What's going on?" "I have a job for you," Connor says, leaning back in his chair like he's ordering a pizza. "It's at a restaurant. Rose's Kitchen, 428 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard." "All right, what's the job?" Mike asks. "A gas line inspection," Connor says, smooth as silk. "But I need a very specific thing from you," he continues. "I need you to loosen one of the valves, just a little, enough to cause a slow, steady leak, something nobody would notice right away. You can just feel the dead air on the other end of the line." Then, finally, Mike's voice comes back, hesitant. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Connor fires back. "And I'll pay you $5,000. Cash. No paper trail, no receipt, just you, me, and the work," Connor pushed. An even longer silence. "Dude, if there's a gas leak and somebody's in there," Mike starts to say. "That's the whole point, Mike," Connor cuts him off, his voice completely flat, completely devoid of emotion. "I need this done on the night of October 28th, around 8 p.m. I'm going to make sure she's in the kitchen by herself after they close." Brittany's blood ran cold. She told me it felt like her heart just stopped. On the recording, Mike asks the question she's screaming in her head. "She? Who is she?" And Connor says it. "My wife, and I need to make sure she doesn't walk out." Brittany slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped it. She forced herself to rewind it 10 seconds. She played it again. "I need to make sure she doesn't walk out." She played it a third time, a fourth. Every single time he said it, the words were like a physical blow. Connor wasn't just trying to steal her restaurant anymore. This was a whole new level of evil. He was actively planning to murder her, hiring a stranger to rig a gas leak and blow her to kingdom come. She forced herself to press play again, to watch the rest. On the screen, Mike's voice is barely a whisper. "Man, I don't know about this. That's crazy dangerous. If somebody dies?" "Nobody is going to trace it back to you," Connor interrupts, all business. "It's going to look like an accident. Old building, bad gas line, tragic explosion. The fire marshal rules it accidental. My wife is gone. I inherit the restaurant as her grieving husband, and I sell it the next day. It's clean, it's simple, and you're 5 grand richer, Connor adds, sealing the deal. I I gotta think about it, Mike finally mumbles. You have until March 15th, Connor tells him. After that, the offer's gone. Call me. The call ends, and Connor, he just sets his phone down, stretches his arms over his head, and goes right back to typing on his laptop like he didn't just casually arrange his own wife's murder. Brittany closed the computer and just sat there in the pitch black room, staring into space. October 28th. He had been planning to kill her for 8 months. For 8 months, he had been living in her house, kissing her goodnight, telling her he loved her, all while orchestrating her death. She felt like she was going to throw up. She stumbled into the bathroom and just splashed freezing water on her face over and over. When she finally looked up at the mirror, she didn't even recognize the woman staring back at her. This person was pale. Her eyes were huge and hollow, and she looked absolutely terrified. But under all that fear, something else was bubbling up to the surface. A white-hot, furious rage. Connor had poisoned her for 3 months. He'd forged her name and conspired with Jake Brennan to steal her legacy. He had slept with her own sister. And now, he was trying to have her killed. He wanted her dead, wiped off the face of the earth, erased, so he could have everything she'd ever worked for and ride off into the sunset with Ashley. Brittany gripped the bathroom sink, her knuckles turning white, just breathing. And she thought, no, not happening. She walked straight back to the bedroom, flipped open her laptop, and exported the video file. She made 3 copies. One went to her phone, one to a USB drive she buried deep in her purse, and one she emailed to a secret account Connor knew nothing about. Then, she opened her phone and sent a text to Detective Evans. I have something. We need to meet tomorrow morning. It's urgent. The reply came back in less than 30 seconds. 7 a.m., my office. What is it? Brittany's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. Then she typed it out. Connor hired someone to kill me. I have it all on video. The little typing dots appeared, vanished, then appeared again. A new message popped up. Jesus Christ, Brittany. Are you safe right now? Yes, she typed back. He's asleep. I'm fine. Lock your bedroom door. Do not let him in. I will see you at 7 sharp, the detective commanded. Brittany locked the door. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed, her laptop still open, and she watched the video one last time. October 28th, Connor had the date, the time, the place, the whole thing planned out. But what he didn't plan for, the one fatal mistake he made, was that he had no idea she was watching his every move. He had no idea she was recording. Not a clue. But she had it now. Cold, hard, undeniable proof that Ryan Clark had tried to hire a man to murder his own wife. Tomorrow, she'd hand it all to Detective Miller, and this whole nightmare would be over. But as Madison sat there in the dark, the sound of her husband's breathing in the other room, a steady, haunting rhythm, a strange calm washed over her. The fear was gone. The complete collapse of Ryan Clark's life didn't start with a scream or a fight. It started with a quiet meeting in a tired-looking office downtown. It was early March, the 5th to be exact, a little after 4 p.m. when his wife, Madison, stepped into Anderson Investigations. She was carrying a secret, a date she'd circled on her calendar, October 28th, a deadline, 8 months from now, for a reckoning her husband had absolutely no idea was coming his way. The guy she met, Frank Wallace was apparently straight out of a movie, a PI in his 50s, gray buzz cut, buried behind stacks of case files and styrofoam coffee cups. He stood to shake her hand, and Madison, gripping her purse like it was the only thing holding her together, sat down to face the absolute demolition of her marriage. She'd put Frank on the payroll 5 days before, right after she found a video that shattered her entire world. A video of Ryan, hiring some guy named Tyler Donovan to kill her. She'd already given a copy to Detective Sarah Miller, who launched an official investigation and told her to just lay low. But Madison couldn't sit still. She had to know why. She had to know just how deep this betrayal went, and if her own sister, Ashley, was swimming in it with him. So she tasked Frank with a simple job: follow Ryan and Ashley, document everything. Now, here he was, sliding a thick manila folder across his desk, a preliminary report, he called it. He'd been tailing them for just 5 days, and let's just say they weren't exactly trying to hide. Madison opened it. First, a typed up summary, and then the photos. There were so many. Ryan and Ashley checking into the Marriott downtown. Ryan and Ashley in a dark corner of a bar, their fingers laced together. Ryan and Ashley stealing a kiss in a Fred Meyer parking lot, of all places. Every picture was like a fresh stab wound. Frank just leaned back, confirming what she already knew in her gut. They were meeting 3 times a week. Always the same hotel. Always between 2 and 5 in the afternoon when Madison was swamped running her restaurant. They'd check in using a fake name, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, and Ryan always paid in cash. Madison just nodded, taking it all in. Then Frank dropped the next bomb. Her sister, he said, was seeing a fertility specialist. He'd tailed Ashley to the Portland Fertility Center twice in the last week alone. She had regular appointments, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. sharp. He slid another photo across the desk. Ashley walking out of the clinic, a folder tucked under her arm. As far as he could tell, she'd been a patient there since January. It looked like Ashley was dead serious about starting a family. You can just imagine Madison's world tilting on its axis. Ashley, trying to have a baby with her husband. Does she know he's married? She asked Frank, her voice barely a whisper. He said he could only guess, but from the way they acted, they were building a life together, even talking about opening a new restaurant, one they were going to call Ashley's Table. He told her they were planning a move to Seattle. They weren't hiding their life from each other, just from the one person who mattered, Madison. Then Frank pushed one last photo toward her. It showed the two of them in a coffee shop. Ryan was holding up a piece of paper for Ashley, and she was just beaming. Frank had snapped this one just yesterday. He wasn't close enough to read the paper, but it looked official. Maybe some kind of medical form. As Madison stared at that smiling face, something just clicked. She asked to see the photo again, a sick, horrible feeling starting to creep into her mind. She pulled out her phone, pinching and zooming in on the image. The logo on the paper in Ryan's hand was crystal clear, Oregon Wellness Clinic, and below it, the patient's name, Ryan Clark. The diagnosis read, low sperm count with a treatment plan of testosterone therapy. Estimated completion, December 2024. And that's when her blood ran cold. Without a second's hesitation, she was on the phone with Detective Miller. She told the detective she needed a favor, something checked out on the down low, Ryan's official medical records. She had to know if he'd ever had a vasectomy. There was a pause. Miller asked why she would think that. Because, Madison said, She was pretty damn sure he was showing her sister completely fabricated medical documents. Miller said she'd look into it. With the active criminal investigation, she already had a warrant. The only sound for what felt like an eternity was the clacking of a keyboard on the other end of the line as Madison waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. Frank just sat there, watching, silent. Finally, Miller's voice cut through the static. She had his file open. Ryan Michael Clark, born April 12th, 1988. Then a sharp intake of breath from the detective. He'd had a vasectomy. Miller read out the details. The procedure was done on August 15th, 2019, at Oregon Health and Science University. The file described it as a permanent sterilization. No reversals on file. This was 3 years before he and Madison even walked down the aisle. The lie wasn't just a lie, it was an entire foundation of deceit. Madison's voice was shaking when she told the detective how Ryan always said he just wasn't ready for kids yet, that it was something they'd talk about in a few years. It was all an act. And by feeding her sister doctored medical records, it was obvious he was playing Ashley just as hard. She hung up the phone, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She looked across the desk at Frank. He had a vasectomy, she said, the words feeling foreign in her own mouth. 5 years ago. He'd been lying to both of them the entire time. She opened her laptop and pulled up the cloud account where she'd been stockpiling evidence, including texts she'd screenshot from Ryan's phone before he got smart and changed the passcode. And there it was. A message from Ryan to his buddy, Marcus Brennan, sent back on February 25th. "Keep them hoping, bro," it read. "Hope is the best drug." He spelled it out right there. As long as Madison believed she might have a family with him one day, she'd never leave. And as long as Ashley believed she was on the verge of getting pregnant, she'd do anything he asked. The text laid it all bare. Ryan didn't love Madison. He sure as hell didn't love Ashley. He was using them, playing them against each other with a future he knew was impossible. He was poisoning Madison to weaken her, to make it easier to steal her family's restaurant. He was lying to Ashley about a baby so she'd help him do it. His whole sick plan was right there in black and white. Kill Madison, inherit the restaurant, liquidate it, and vanish with the money. Ashley was just another casualty, a tool to be used and discarded, and she had no idea. Madison snapped her laptop shut and looked at Frank, her expression now hard as stone. She told him to keep following them. She needed everything he could possibly find. She walked out of Frank's office that day with a folder full of her husband's betrayal and a gaping hole where her heart used to be. The man she'd married was in love with 2 things: money and control, and her own sister, the girl whose hair she used to braid, was just another piece he was moving around the board. I'm told that part of her, a small part, wanted to call Ashley, to scream at her, to warn her about how she was being played. But then there was that other part, the part that couldn't get the image of that kiss out of her head, the part that kept hearing the words, Ashley's table. And that part of her felt her sister deserved to find out the truth the same way she did, the hard way. Ryan had lied to both of them, but now only one of them knew the whole story, and Madison was about to use it like a weapon. It had been a long 7.5 months since she found that video of Ryan hiring Tyler Donovan. 7 months since she first sat across from Detective Sarah Miller, her hands shaking as she played the recording of her husband plotting to blow up her restaurant, Rose's Kitchen, with her trapped inside. 7 long months of playing the dutiful wife, of gathering evidence, of waiting for this exact moment. Detective Miller had wanted to slap the cuffs on Ryan right then and there, but Madison convinced her to wait. If they arrested him now, she argued, he'd have an out. He'd get some slick defense attorney to claim it was all just fantasy, just angry talk. But if they let him walk right into their trap, if they caught him in the act, there would be no way out. It would be conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Airtight. So they waited. Miller's team got the warrants and quietly pulled in Tyler Donovan, the would-be hitman who sang like a canary. He admitted he'd been paid $5,000 in cash to rig a gas valve at Rose's kitchen 3 days before October 28th and then just disappear. Ryan's job was simple. Make sure Madison was working late in the kitchen that night, all alone. A slow gas leak, a single spark from the stove, and it all looks like a tragic accident. He gets to play the grieving widower who sells the restaurant and rides off into the sunset. But he forgot one thing. Madison knew. And now, on Friday afternoon, October 25th, just 3 days out, it was finally time to make sure his plan went completely off the rails. Standing in the kitchen of her restaurant, phone pressed tight against her ear, Madison calmly dialed a number. Oregon Natural Gas Customer Service. A polite voice named Brenda answered. Madison explained she was calling from Rose's Kitchen on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, and she was pretty sure she could smell gas near the main stove. The company, of course, took it very seriously, promising to dispatch a technician immediately. She confirmed the address, 428 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, Portland. They assured her someone would be there within the hour. 50 minutes later, a white Oregon natural gas van pulled up to the curb. So, this guy shows up in a blue jumpsuit, right out of a movie, carrying a toolbox and one of those gas detectors. Megan meets him at the door, giving a fake name, Jessica Morgan, saying she's the owner. The tech, a guy named Connor Riley, shakes her hand, and she walks him into the kitchen where he gets straight to work, scanning the pipes and all the connections around her stove. It doesn't even take a full minute for his face to scrunch up. He looks at her and says she was damn right to call. He points to this little brass fitting on the main gas line, tucked away behind the stove. It had been loosened. He tells her it wasn't enough to be a problem right away, but if she'd cranked the stove on high, it would have started gushing gas fast enough to blow the whole damn place sky high. Our source tells us this knot of pure dread had been twisting in her stomach for weeks, but you'd never know it from her face. It was a total mask. She just tells the technician she needs him to fix a valve that's come loose. Yeah, absolutely, this guy Connor says. I'll get it tightened down right now. I'll check the whole system too, just to make sure everything's secure. For the next 20 minutes, he's a total pro, checking every last connection, running his detector over the line. Finally, he stands up. Okay, you're good, he tells her. Everything's tight. No leaks. But you could see something was bugging him. I gotta ask, he says. Do you have any idea how that valve got loosened? That kind of thing doesn't just happen on its own. Megan swallows hard, the lie already forming on her lips. I have no idea. Maybe someone bumped into it. He gives her this look, like he's not buying it for a second. But he doesn't push. All right, well, it's fixed now. I'll file the report with the company. And that's when she makes her play. Actually, she starts pulling $500 out of her purse. She spins this whole story about her husband, Jake, saying he's got crippling anxiety. If he finds out she called the gas company, he'd absolutely lose it, thinking she's paranoid. And it would kick off this insane fight. Could you maybe Not file the report? She asks. Just keep it between us? Consider this a tip for coming out so quickly. Connor just stares at the cash, then back at her face. Ma'am, I'm supposed to file every single service call, he says, and you can hear he's torn. I know, Megan pleads, but please, it's fixed now. It's all safe. I just can't handle the drama at home. You could see him wrestling with it for a second before he finally takes the money and shoves it in his pocket. All right, but if you smell gas again, you call me immediately. She promises she will. The second he's gone, she locks the door, finally letting out this ragged, shaky breath. The first piece of her plan was locked in. The immediate danger was handled, but Megan knew this was nowhere near over. Jake had no idea the valve was fixed. In his mind, the bomb was still ticking. She needed an insurance policy, a kill switch of her own. She needed to be able to control the gas line herself. So she makes another call, this time to a private outfit, Walsh Gas Consulting. A man answers, "This is Paul." She replies, "Hi, Paul. My name is Megan." She just lays it all out. She needs someone to install a remote shutoff valve on a commercial gas line today, if possible, and that money is not an issue. Paul says his schedule is slammed, but he can squeeze her in around 6 p.m. At 6 o'clock on the dot, an unmarked truck pulls up. Paul is in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, just wearing jeans and a flannel. A retired gas engineer her friend Ashley had recommended. The guy had a reputation for being discreet and getting the job done. No questions asked. She lets him in through the back door. "Show me the line," is all he says. In the kitchen, he looks over the main valve, all the connections. "You want a remote valve installed right here?" he asks. Megan confirms it. "Yes, something I can control from my phone, so I can shut off the gas from literally anywhere." He just gives her this long, steady look, raising an eyebrow. "You in some kind of trouble?" he asks her, straight up. "Let's just say I need to be able to control my own building," she tells him. He just nods slowly, accepting that was all he was going to get. Fair enough. I can install a smart valve with a cellular connection. You'll be able to shut it off from an app on your phone. It'll take about 2 hours. $1,200. Done, she says. No hesitation. Paul works with this quiet intensity, installing the device right behind the stove. When he's all done, he shows her an app on his own phone. "Here, download this app, Gas Safe Pro," he tells her. "I've already linked your valve to it. See that button?" On the screen is this huge red button that just says "Emergency Shut Off." He explains, "You press that, the valve closes instantly. No gas gets through. Your stove won't light up, your oven won't turn on. Everything just stops." She finishes for him. She asks him how to turn it back on. "You press the green button," he says, "but for safety, I'd recommend you do it manually at the valve itself." It was absolutely perfect. She hands him $1,200 in cash. He pockets it, gives her a single nod, and is gone without another word. She was left standing alone in her kitchen, just staring at the phone in her hand. One button. A single button was all that now stood between her husband's plan and her life. She had to test it. She presses the red button and hears a solid click as the valve shuts. She presses the green, it clicks back open. She does this 3 more times, just to be sure. A handheld gas detector was already on its way, set to arrive Sunday. The kitchen was secure. The power had shifted, and her husband, Jake, had absolutely no clue. She walks over to the window, just watching the sunset. casting these long, creepy shadows. In just 3 days, Jake would walk through the door of her restaurant, fully expecting her to die. He was expecting a fireball, a hefty inheritance, and a clean getaway. But he was about to learn just how wrong he really was. My source told me that October 28th wasn't going to be the day she died. No, it was going to be the day Jake got caught, and she was going to be the one holding the match. So on Sunday evening, October 27th, she's sitting all alone in the back office of Rose's place, phone in her hand, with this cold, heavy dread sitting in her stomach. Tomorrow was the day Jake had planned to murder her, the day this all had to end. The restaurant was always closed on Sundays, so the dining room was completely swallowed by darkness. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the big refrigerator and the faint ticking of an old wall clock her grandma had hung up 30 years ago. Outside, the rain was just hammering against the windows like this frantic, desperate drumbeat. She opens a burner phone app, one that gives her a completely untraceable number. She'd used it before to text her friend Ashley, to keep certain conversations away from Jake's prying eyes. But tonight, the purpose was so much darker. Tonight, she was using it to set a trap for her own sister, Brittany. She just stares at the blank screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was it. This was the moment she was going to trick Brittany into walking straight into the fire. There was this tiny, sentimental part of her that wanted to call instead, to just scream a warning down the phone. She wanted to tell her that Jake was just using her, that he was going to throw her away the second she wasn't useful anymore. She wanted to scream at her about the vasectomy, the faked medical records, the sick, cruel texts where Jake laughed about giving Brittany false hope. But she couldn't. Brittany had made her choice. She chose Jake. She chose to have an affair with her own sister's husband. She chose to help him try and steal Rose's place. And tomorrow night, she was going to have to face the consequences of that choice. Megan takes this deep, ragged breath and starts to type. The message had to be perfect, had to sound exactly like him. Just the right mix of cocky and urgent. She'd been reading Jake's texts for months. She knew his voice better than her own. She types, "Babe, Megan's throwing a last-minute anniversary party tomorrow night, October 28th, 8 p.m. at Rose's to try and win me back. She invited my mom and a bunch of our friends to guilt trip me into staying. It's actually perfect." She keeps typing, laying out the rest of the trap for Brittany. With all those people there, the accident will look even more legit, and no one will ever suspect a thing. Just show up like you're any other guest. Be nice to Megan, and when it happens after everyone leaves around 10 p.m., we'll both have alibis because we were in a huge crowd. Don't call me back. Megan's been watching me like a hawk. Trust me, baby. After tomorrow night, we're free. I love you. She reads the message over 3, then 4 times, checking every single word, making sure the twisted logic was something a woman that desperate would actually believe. Then she hits send. The delivery confirmation pops up almost instantly. She puts the phone down, her heart just pounding against her ribs. What if Brittany called him? What if she didn't fall for it? It was 7:34 p.m. She just waited. 1 minute ticks by, then 2, 5. Then the phone buzzes, and she snatches it up. It's a reply from Brittany. "Okay, babe, I'll be there. After tomorrow, we'll have everything right." Megan just stares at the words, and you have to imagine something inside her just fractured. "We'll have everything." Brittany actually believed him. She really thought Jake loved her, that he was going to leave Megan for her, that they were going to build this new life with the insurance money from the restaurant. Brittany had no idea Jake had gotten a vasectomy 5 years ago. She had no clue he'd been lying to her face about starting a family, that she was nothing more than a pawn in his disgusting, murderous game. Megan types back, her fingers feeling like they belonged to someone else, still playing the part of Jake. "We'll have everything, baby, I promise. See you tomorrow. Wear something nice." And then she adds one last cruel twist. "And remember, act surprised when you walk in." Brittany's reply came back immediately. "I will. I love you," was the last message from Brittany. Megan closed the app and wiped the entire conversation. Sitting there in that dark office, she felt nothing but this profound, hollow emptiness. There was no victory here, no feeling of being clever, just this deep, aching sadness. Tomorrow, her sister was going to walk into that restaurant thinking her dream was about to start. And instead, her entire world was going to be absolutely shattered. But Megan knew she couldn't let that stop her. Not yet. She got up and stared out the front window, the rain smearing the streetlights into long, blurry streaks. Somewhere in that city, Jake was in his apartment, probably shooting a text to the real Brittany, running through the lines he'd feed the cops about the so-called tragic accident that was supposed to take his wife's life. And somewhere, Brittany was smiling, convinced she'd finally gotten everything she wanted. But tomorrow, they'd both get a brutal reality check. Tomorrow, the trap she'd laid with such painstaking care would finally snap shut. Morgan turned away from the glass, locked up the office, and drove home. Every piece was on the board. She controlled the restaurant's gas line from her phone. The evidence against Jake was backed up to the cloud in 2 separate hard drives. Her friend Sarah knew every single detail. The invitations for her little party were out. And now, Brittany had just confirmed she was coming. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., every person Jake had screwed over and lied to would be under one roof. And when she was through, he and Brittany would be leaving in police cars. Monday, October 28th, 6 a.m. sharp. Morgan's eyes opened in her dark bedroom. No alarm needed. Sleep hadn't really come anyway. This was the day. She grabbed her phone, pulled up the GasSafe Pro app, and pressed the massive red button labeled Emergency Shut Off. 2 miles away at her restaurant, a valve clicked shut. No gas, no boom. Jake's little murder plot was officially toast. She got dressed, her grandmother's old apron already folded in her bag. The story, as I've been able to piece it together, really starts on a wet Portland street, with Morgan driving toward the heirloom, the restaurant her grandmother poured her soul into. She let herself in the back door, stepping into that cold, silent kitchen that still smelled faintly of old spices, like ghosts of meals cooked with love. And right there, after tying on that apron, the real work started. This was never about cooking. This was about serving justice. Her plan was a 7-course meal of revenge, with each plate representing one of his sins, one more nail in the coffin she was building for Jake Caldwell, her husband. Each course would expose another lie he'd told to steal everything that mattered to her. She began by writing it all down on a chalkboard. Course 1, bitter coffee, ipecac poisoning. The second course was centered on a forged contract and a faked signature. Course 3 was all about broken promises and a secret vasectomy. The fourth course would serve up the raw betrayal of his affair. The fifth course presented his murder-for-hire plot, a staged gas leak. Course 6 was pure, unadulterated greed, a vision for a restaurant called Brittany's Table. And the final course, number 7, just the truth, a final reckoning. She told my source she stood back and knew it was perfect. It was a cold, clinical takedown. And she was the head surgeon. The first course was deceptively simple. She brewed a pot of brutally dark, bitter coffee and poured out a single cup. Right next to it on the serving tray, she laid out a lab report from Providence Medical. It confirmed what she already knew: ipecac syrup, 15 milliliters of it. This was the poison Jake had been feeding her every single morning for 3 straight months. His quiet little way of making her sick, of breaking her will. The second course was a deconstructed salad, served on a clear glass plate that revealed a photocopy underneath, the fraudulent contract to sell her business. The signature wasn't hers. The price was $2.8 million, and Connor Vance's name was right there at the bottom. The third course was pan-seared salmon, a dish as beautiful as it was laced with bitterness. She plated it right next to a copy of Jake's vasectomy record from the University Medical Center. The date on it was August 15th, 2019, a full 3 years before he married her, and 5 years before he was whispering promises to his mistress, Brittany, about starting a family with her. The fourth course was a roasted lamb, perfectly seasoned, but served with a sickening side of printed out text messages. The exchange between Jake and Brittany was all there in black and white. "I love you, babe," one read. "After this is over, we'll have everything. Brittany's table opens next spring." 18 months of disgusting lies, plated up like a main course. Course 5, she told me, was the hardest one for her to get through. It was her grandmother's signature recipe: a poblano pepper stuffed with spiced meat, covered in walnut sauce and pomegranate seeds. A dish like that takes hours of love and patience. She served it with a printed transcript from a recording she'd gotten off a hidden camera. Jake's voice, bone-chillingly clear: "I need you to loosen the valve just enough for a slow leak," he'd told a guy named Chris Miller. "I'll make sure she's there alone in the kitchen." Then you hear Chris's voice reply: "If someone dies, Jake, there's no way it'll ever trace back to you." For the sixth course dessert, she baked a tres leches cake from her grandma's recipe book. She presented it with a printed email from Connor Vance to Jake, finalizing the whole scheme. As soon as the power of attorney was signed, they'd close the deal on the heirloom. The $2.8 million would hit his account, and Jake would be off to Seattle to start a new life with Brittany. The very last course wasn't even food. It was just a single square of dark chocolate on a sterile white plate. Nothing else, just the unvarnished, bitter truth. She spent the rest of the morning photographing every dish, every piece of evidence, making sure her backup plan had its own backup plan. Sometime around noon, her friend Sarah Grant rolled up in a catering van. Besides a detective on the force, she was the only one who knew the whole god-awful story. Sarah had even prepped half the menu at her own place to take some of the load off Morgan. This quiet act of support in a war nobody else could see. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, setting a tray on the steel counter. "I've been ready since February," Morgan shot back. And that was all they had to say. By 2 in the afternoon, the food was ready to go. Morgan then went to the dining room, setting up a projector and screen, her laptop queued up and waiting. The slideshow she put together was just brutal, a highlight reel of his crimes, crime scene photos from the staged break-in, the damning email chains, his bank statements, and the video of Jake hiring Chris Miller to kill her. At 3 o'clock, Detective Ashley Hayes dropped by. She was off duty wearing jeans, but you could see the badge clipped to her belt. "You good?" she asked. Morgan told her she was. Jake, she explained, had no idea what was coming. The detective just nodded, confirming she'd be there at 7:45. Just another guest in the back. "If this thing goes sideways, I'm 2 seconds away," she promised. "It won't," Morgan said, her voice solid as a rock. The detective gave her shoulder a squeeze and said, "Your grandmother would be so proud of you." Morgan couldn't speak. She just nodded. At 5, she started setting the 15 places at the tables, laying out white tablecloths and name cards. She put Jake at the head of the table, his mistress Brittany to his right, and his partner in crime Connor to his left. She would sit at the other end, staring right at him from the seat of power. By 6 o'clock, the trap was ready. She hung the big chalkboard on the wall. 7 courses? 7 sins? At 6:30, she slipped into a simple black dress and put on the silver earrings her grandmother had left for her. The woman in the mirror looked tougher, older, but she looked ready. By 7, the candles were all lit, filling the room with a warm, deceptive light. She stood in the doorway and just took it all in. The tables, the screen, the evidence disguised as a gourmet meal. Her phone buzzed. It was Jake. "On my way. See you soon, babe." She didn't bother replying. A second text came in, this one from Brittany. "Almost there. Nervous but excited." A cold little smile touched Morgan's lips. Oh, Brittany had every right to be nervous. At 7:30, she opened a bottle of wine but didn't pour any. She just held the glass, feeling its solid weight as she waited. Everything was set. The party was about to start, and Jake Caldwell had no idea he was the guest of honor at his own execution. Before I tell you what went down in that dining room on October 28th, comment the word truth below. So I know you're ready for this. What happened next is something my source will carry with them for the rest of their life. Some of what you're about to hear has been dramatized for effect. The dining room of the heirloom was glowing, lit by about 24 candles, whose flames were dancing in a light draft from an open window. Morgan was standing near the host stand in a deep burgundy dress she'd picked out just for this night. A color that screamed elegance and total control. The air smelled of roasted garlic and basil, a warm, inviting scent for a night that was about to become anything but. The 5-course meal she had spent the last 3 hours preparing was one that no one in that room was ever going to forget. Her hands, from what I'm told, were rock steady as she made a final tweak to the rose in the centerpiece. Her phone screen showed 7:58 p.m. in just 2 minutes. The first guest would walk through that door, and the elaborate trap she'd spent 8 months building would finally spring. At 5 minutes after 8, the door creaked open. Jake Caldwell walked in, wearing that confident, easy smile that was a complete and utter lie. He was in the same charcoal suit Morgan had bought him for their first anniversary. He walked straight to her, pulled her into a hug, and kissed her forehead with that same fake tenderness he'd used on their wedding day. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," he whispered. Morgan managed to force a smile, playing the role of the loving wife for the very last time. "Thank you for coming," she murmured, her thumb brushing against the gas safe app on her phone, which was buried deep in the pocket of her dress. At 8:10, Brittany showed up, her hair pinned up perfectly, her dress practically screaming for Jake's attention. She put on a show of being surprised when she looked around the room. "Morgan, you invited me?" she asked, her voice all light and innocent. "All right. So tonight's story comes from a listener, and it's a heavy one. So Jake's wife, Brittany, is standing there, watching her own sister, Olivia, walk in. Olivia forces this tight little smile and says, "Just thought I'd say hello." Brittany plays along, smiling back but with ice in her eyes, saying, "Of course, I invited you, Olivia. Your family." And for just a split second, Olivia's eyes flick over to Jake before she looks away. The tension is already suffocating. Then, at 8:15, this guy, Connor Reed, makes his entrance. He's got that slick, firm handshake, greeting Jake like they're best buds. He says all the right things, you know? Jake, good to see you. And then turns on the charm for Brittany, thanking her for the invite and complimenting her late grandmother's restaurant. He's smooth, and he's part of the trap. Brittany just gives him a little nod, but she catches it. She sees Jake's own smile crack for just a second as he watches Connor sit down. Then, at 8:20, Jake's mom, Karen, just sweeps in, looking every bit the proud mother-in-law in this lavender blouse and pearls. She's completely in the dark. She pulls Brittany into this big, genuine hug. "My dear daughter-in-law," she gushes, her voice just full of love. "I'm so proud of you both. 2 years already." And Brittany just holds on, letting the hug last a little too long, feeling this wave of guilt because Karen has absolutely no idea the kind of monster she raised. Finally, at 8:25, Detective Sarah Miller arrives. She's dressed down, trying to look like just another guest, but her badge is tucked away in her purse. She gives Brittany a hug, but there's this look that passes between them, a silent understanding. "Brittany, it's been too long," she says, loud enough for everyone to hear, playing her part perfectly. Brittany gives her hand a quick squeeze, a silent thank you, a confirmation that Sarah isn't there to celebrate. She's there to bear witness. Over the next 15 minutes, the rest of the guests trickle in. Her Aunt Carol shows up at 8:28, still in her nurse's scrubs from a long shift. Then her cousin Michael and his wife Jessica arrive at 8:32. They've got their 2-year-old daughter, Lily, sleeping in Jessica's arms. You have the Petersons, this sweet old couple who'd been regulars at the restaurant for over 20 years, arriving at 8:36 with wine. Even Father Michael, the priest who married Brittany and Jake 2 years ago, gets there at 8:40. He's got a prayer book tucked under his arm. Then comes Ashley, Brittany's best friend from culinary school, at 8:43 with her camera around her neck because she documents everything. And last, at 8:47, her lawyer, Ben Carter, arrives. His presence is a quiet guarantee that everything about to happen is buttoned up and legally airtight. So by 8:50, the whole scene is set. All 15 guests are sitting around this long table, their faces lit by candlelight, just making small talk. The room feels warm, normal, deceptively normal. Brittany stands at the head of the table, raises her wine glass, and waits for the chatter to die down. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she starts, and her voice is rock solid. 2 years ago, Jake and I stood before many of you and promised to love and honor each other for the rest of our lives. Tonight, I wanted to celebrate that promise with the people who matter most to us. She pauses, her eyes scanning every single person at that table. She sees Jake's smug, confident smile, her sister Olivia's carefully blank face, Connor Reed's polite curiosity, her mother-in-law Karen's beaming pride, Detective Miller's watchful eyes. They're all there, all waiting, completely clueless about the bomb that's about to drop. "I've prepared a very special meal for you tonight. 5 courses," she continues, her voice still so warm and welcoming, each one inspired by a memory from my grandmother Rose's recipes. But more than that, I have a story to share, a story about trust, about betrayal, and about the lengths people will go to protect what they love. And that's when she sees it. Jake's smile falters, his hand tightens around his wine glass. He knows. He knows something is terribly wrong. She puts her glass down, walks over to the kitchen door, and gestures toward the first course sitting on the counter. Just a simple heirloom tomato bruschetta. The first course will be out in just a moment, she says, turning back to her guests, her audience, and with it, the first chapter of tonight's story. She finds Jake's eyes across the table, holds his gaze for one long, cold second, and smiles. I think you're all going to find it very enlightening. By 8:55 on October 28th, 2024, every pawn was in place. Brittany stood there, holding a silver tray, knowing she was about to burn their entire world to the ground in the next 35 minutes. She places a single white porcelain cup of coffee right in front of Jake, steam rising from it, and begins. For 3 months, 90 straight days, my husband made me coffee every single morning, she says, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. He was so loving, so attentive. But what he didn't tell me was that every cup contained 15 milliliters of ipecac syrup, a drug designed to induce violent vomiting. She pulls a folded toxicology report from her pocket and holds it up for everyone to see. This is from Providence Medical Lab, dated February 19th, 2024. It confirms ipecac poisoning. Jake was systematically weakening me, so I couldn't fight what he planned next. Jake's face drains of all color. His knuckles are white, gripping the table. But Brittany doesn't give him an inch. She moves to a laptop and projects an email onto the dining room wall. The second truth is about theft, she says, her voice turning sharp. This is an email from Connor Reed to Jake, dated November 3rd, 2023. It reads, once you have power of attorney, the transfer will take 90 days. Make sure she's too weak to fight it. And here, she clicks, is Jake's response from January 22nd, 2024. Ipecac is working, she's losing weight, and barely has energy to run the kitchen. By April, we'll have everything. She turns to Connor, whose face is a mask of fury. You offered $2.8 million for my restaurant, Mr. Reed. You thought I was a fool. Connor jumps to his feet, but Detective Sarah Miller is already moving, blocking the door, her hand resting near her badge. Sit down, she says quietly. You're not going anywhere. Brittany taps the keyboard again, splitting the screen. The third truth is about the lies Jake told my sister, she says, turning to Olivia, who looks utterly lost. On the left is a fake fertility report from a clinic that doesn't exist, claiming Jake has a low sperm count. On the right is his actual medical record from 5 years ago, dated August 15th, 2019, a vasectomy. The room goes dead silent for 3 long seconds. That clinic doesn't exist, Olivia, Brittany says, her voice breaking just a little. Jake made that document to keep you hoping, to keep you under his thumb. He never, ever intended to have a baby with you. He was using you. Olivia's face just crumbles, tears streaming down as she turns to Jake. Is this true? She whispers. Jake says nothing. His jaw is clenched so tight you can see the muscle jumping. The fourth truth comes as a slideshow of pure heartbreak. Photos of Jake and Olivia kissing in a hotel lobby, holding hands in the town square, wrapped around each other outside a wine bar. These were taken by a private investigator I hired over the past 6 months, Brittany explains, her voice flat. My sister and my husband, having an affair right under my roof. Karen, Jake's mom, lets out this choked sob, her hands flying to her mouth. Jake, she gasps, her voice shattered. How could you? Jake finally loses it, his voice low and desperate. Mom, this isn't what it looks like. Brittany is twisting everything. But she cuts him off. Am I? She asks and presses play on an audio file. Jake's voice fills the silent room. I need you to do something for me, Rick. his recorded voice says. There's a gas line at the restaurant, behind the stove. Loosen the valve, just enough so it leaks slowly, not enough to smell right away. A gruff voice replies, cautious. You're talking about an explosion. And then Jake's voice comes back, cold as ice. I'm talking about an accident. $5,000 cash, October 28th, after 8 p.m. The recording ends. Brittany holds up her phone, showing an app. The fifth truth is attempted murder, she says. Jake hired a man named Rick Fisher to sabotage this kitchen tonight. He planned for this building to explode at 8 o'clock, killing me and everyone here, including his own mother, just to make it look like an accident. Karen just collapses, sobbing, and Aunt Carol rushes to her side. Jake leaps to his feet, his face beet red. I didn't mean for anyone else to get hurt, he screams. It was only supposed to be. He stops, but it's too late. He's admitted it. Brittany then pulls up the final piece of the puzzle. Text messages between Jake and Olivia. The sixth truth is ambition, she says. It's a text from Jake to Olivia. After Brittany is gone, we'll open our own place. Olivia's table, just you and me. And Olivia's reply, I can't wait. I love you. Olivia just buries her face in her hands, her whole body shaking. Brittany puts her phone down. And the seventh truth, she says, her voice dropping to a whisper, is justice. And on cue, Detective Sarah Miller steps forward, her badge now clipped to her belt. Her voice is all business. Jacob, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and solicitation of arson, she announces. Connor Reed, you are under arrest as an accessory. She pulls out the cuffs and snaps them onto Jake's wrists as he just stands there, completely and utterly destroyed. All right, everyone, settle in. The story we're diving into tonight came from a listener, and it's a heavy one. It's about a man named Connor, and how the perfect life he built was actually a meticulously crafted cage for his wife. Our listener was there when it all came crashing down at 9:28 p.m. on October 28th, 2024. Picture this. A dinner party, shattered by the back door swinging open. Detective Evans stepped in and, with this chilling efficiency, snapped a pair of cuffs on Connor. His face just went white. And that's when the detective started reading him his rights. Connor's head dropped. His entire body just slumped in total defeat. And our listener said you could feel the tension in the room just break. It wasn't a celebration, nothing like that. It was just this quiet, heavy feeling that the monster had finally been caught. Across the table, a friend named Megan was just collapsed, sobbing, while Connor's own mother, Sharon, grabbed our listener's hand, her eyes completely bloodshot. I'm so sorry, she just kept whispering. I had no idea. Our listener squeezed her hand back, trying to comfort her, telling her it was never her fault. And then, at 9:30 p.m., as the door clicked shut behind Connor, the room fell dead silent, except for Megan's crying. And in that silence, it hit everyone. They were all sitting there, shocked and grieving. But they were alive. Every single one of them was alive. It's over. Brittany, Connor's wife, said into the quiet, it's finally over. Just 5 minutes later, at 9:35, Detective Miller stood in the middle of that kitchen. Her badge was gleaming in the candlelight as she looked at the stunned guests still frozen in their seats, their faces just pale with shock and horror. Our listener watched as Detective Miller cut right through the tension in the room. She laid it all out. What they had just witnessed was the grand finale of an 8-month deep dive into a nightmare of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. I need everyone to stay right where you are, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. My team needs to process this scene. Then she turned her full attention to Connor, who was just standing there cuffed, his face a mask of pure rage. Connor Harrison, she said, her voice formal and cold. You are being charged with the following: attempted murder in the first degree. For the gas explosion, you engineered to kill your wife and 14 other people. And poisoning for the ipecac syrup, you systematically fed her over a 90-day period, from November 15th, 2023 to February 14th, 2024. But she was just getting started. Conspiracy to commit fraud by faking power of attorney to forge the sale of Brittany's restaurant, valued at $2.8 million. Solicitation of arson and murder for hire for your deal with an associate on February 27th, 2024, offering him $5,000 in cash to tamper with the gas line in this very house. And finally, she said, identity fraud for creating fake medical records from a non-existent clinic, the Oregon Wellness Clinic. Each charge landed like a punch to the gut. Connor's rage just curdled into this pathetic desperation. This is a trap, he screamed, his voice cracking. Brittany set me up. He was spiraling, but Detective Miller's face was like stone. Mr. Harrison, we have you on tape, planning the gas line sabotage. We have your emails with Logan Hayes outlining the poisoning schedule and the fraudulent sale. We have toxicology reports, a handwriting expert's analysis, testimony from your wife's attorney, Mark Jennings, and footage from a camera you never even knew was there. She paused, letting it all sink in. You trapped yourself. Her eyes then moved to Logan Hayes, Connor's business partner, standing there silent and stiff. His expensive suit suddenly looked cheap and rumpled. Logan Hayes, you're charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, accessory to attempted murder, and illegal financial transactions, all tied to your scheme with Connor Harrison to steal Brittany's restaurant. The evidence was airtight. An email chain between him and Connor from October 10th, 2023 to January 22nd, 2024 laid out their entire criminal plan. Across the room, Connor's mistress, Ashley, was pressed against a wall, her body just shaking with this raw, visible terror. Detective Miller walked over to her, her voice softer now, but still firm. Ashley, she said, on October 27th, 2024, at 7:30 p.m., you got a text from a number you thought was Connor's, asking you to be here tonight as his alibi for what he planned to be a deadly explosion. Is that correct? Ashley could barely get the word out, just a choked little nod. Yes, he told me Brittany was throwing a surprise party, she sobbed. He wanted me here so we could be together after. He said it would look like an accident, that nobody would ever know. I just thought he meant the divorce would be easy. I never ever knew he wanted to kill her. Detective Miller just watched her for a beat. Were you aware of the poisoning? She asked. Ashley shook her head frantically. No, I swear I wasn't. I knew he was unhappy. I knew he wanted to leave Brittany. But I never thought he was capable of doing something like that. And that's when the detective pulled out a small recorder. Ashley, I am prepared to offer you a deal. If you cooperate completely and testify against Connor Harrison and Logan Hayes, and give us any other evidence you have, we will reduce your charges to accessory after the fact. It's a much lighter sentence. Do you understand? Ashley's tear-filled eyes locked with Brittany's from across the room. Brittany, please, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. I really thought he loved me. Brittany just stood there, arms crossed, her face unreadable. She gave her nothing. At 9:42 p.m., Detective Evans came back in with two forensic techs carrying their kits. "Miller, we're ready to start processing," he said. She just nodded, pointing to a small table. "Bag that laptop," she ordered. The coffee cup in front of Mr. Harrison and Ms. Martinez's phone, the one with the remote gas shut off. Get the documents she brought, too. I want photos of the gas valve behind the stove before you touch it. The engineer who installed the safety override has already given us a statement confirming the initial sabotage. One of the techs started snapping photos of the scene, while the other began carefully bagging evidence. Detective Evans walked over to Connor, pulling a card from his pocket. "Mr. Harrison, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." He kept going, the procedural words echoing in the now quiet room. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. If you decide to answer questions now without an attorney, you still have the right to stop at any time. Do you understand these rights, and are you willing to speak with me?" Connor just stared. His jaw clenched and said absolutely nothing. At 9:50 p.m., Detectives Miller and Evans escorted Connor and Logan out the front door. Ashley followed, her hands cuffed, her loud sobs now just quiet, defeated sniffles. She had taken the deal, signing a statement right there on the dining table. As they were leaving, Connor twisted his body, his eyes finding Brittany's one last time. "You are going to regret this, Brittany," he hissed, his voice just dripping with venom. "You think you won, but you've lost everything." Our listener watched as Brittany met his hateful stare without flinching. "No, Connor," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "You destroyed everything. I just made sure there was a bill." The door shut at 9:53 p.m., and the silence that fell over the restaurant felt heavy, almost holy. Connor's mom, Sharon, was sobbing on a relative's shoulder, while their family priest offered a quiet prayer. Mark Jennings, Brittany's lawyer, put a hand on her arm. "You did what you had to do, Brittany," he said. She just nodded, too emotionally exhausted to speak. For the first time in 8 brutal months, you could literally see the weight on her shoulders begin to disappear. Then, on December 18th, 2024, our listener was in another room for the final chapter of this nightmare. She sat in the front row of courtroom 412, her hands clenched in her lap. It was freezing, the kind of cold that seeps right into your bones. She was there to watch Judge Thompson deliver the sentences. The judge took the bench, her black robe flowing behind her, her face giving nothing away. The trial had been a brutal 3-week marathon, and this was the final act. The room was packed. Reporters from every major local paper were crammed in the back, ready to write the headline. Mark Jennings was right next to Brittany. Detectives Miller and Evans were a few rows back. But there was one person who was glaringly absent: Sharon Harrison, Connor's own mother. She had publicly disowned her son in a press statement almost 3 weeks earlier. Judge Thompson adjusted her glasses and looked down at the three of them. "This court will now deliver sentencing," she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "In the cases of the state versus Connor Michael Harrison, the state versus Logan James Hayes, and the state versus Ashley Elena Martinez, Mr. Harrison, will you please rise?" Connor slowly pushed himself to his feet, the bright orange of his jumpsuit a shocking contrast to his pale, skeletal face. "All right, picture this. You're in a courtroom, the air is thick, and Judge Miller starts reading. Her voice is level, no emotion. Jake Anderson, a jury of your peers has found you guilty on all counts: attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated assault through poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, solicitation of arson, and identity fraud. The evidence, she says, her eyes fixed on him. Your own recorded calls, your emails, the toxicology reports, the forged signatures, testimony from a dozen people, including your co-defendant, Brittany. It all proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you ran a calculated months-long plot to poison your wife, steal her business, and kill her in a blast that would have taken out 14 other innocent people. The room was dead silent. You could feel the weight of it. Then, the judge's voice cut right through. She called what Jake Anderson did a chilling storm of domestic terror, financial poison, and a sickening disregard for human life, the worst she'd seen in years. The sentence came down like a hammer: 12 years in state prison, no chance of parole for the first 8, then 5 more of probation. And that wasn't all. Jake was hit with a $500,000 restitution order to his wife, Emily. The court would fund it by liquidating his entire life, his cars, his stocks, every last dime. They also torpedoed any claim he had on the heirloom kitchen, handing full ownership right back to Emily. I heard Jake's lawyer mumbled something about an appeal, but Jake himself just stood there, completely silent, his shoulders slumping as a bailiff cuffed him and let him out. Then, the judge turned to his right-hand man, Connor Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, please rise." Connor stood up, all cool silver hair and a face that was a total blank slate. The judge read his verdict next. Connor Blackwood was guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud and being an accessory to attempted murder. The court laid it all out. He and Jake Anderson worked together to rip the heirloom kitchen away from Emily, using a playbook of threats, fake documents, and by taking advantage of the fact that she was slowly being poisoned by her own husband. Their whole twisted plan was right there in black and white, in emails from October of 2023 to January 2024. He knew everything, and he was in on all of it. His sentence was brutal: 8 years in prison, 3 years of probation after that, and a 15-year ban from ever owning or running a restaurant in Oregon again. His old company, Cascade Dining Group, had already ghosted him, and a source told me they were a major reason the cops got onto the whole scheme in the first place. Finally, the judge looked over at Megan, Emily's sister. She was just sitting there, her hands knotted together, her eyes racked and red. "Miss Hayes, please rise." Megan got up, shaky on her feet. The record shows she pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact and obstruction, but she had flipped the night of October 28th, singing like a canary against both Jake and Connor. It all came out in court. She didn't know Jake was planning on murder, but she knew enough. She was sleeping with her sister's husband. She was taking cash from his dirty deals and was ready to be his alibi for what she thought was just a minor con. It was a catastrophic failure of character. Her sentence was 2 years of supervised probation, 400 hours of community service in the first year, and mandatory therapy twice a month for the entire term. And a restraining order: no contact with her sister, Emily, period. Through a mess of tears, Megan just nodded and choked out, "Thank you, Your Honor." I'm told that even after it was all over, Emily just sat there, hollowed out. Her friend Brittany was with her, saying, "Emily, you did it. You got justice. You can finally start over," Brittany told her. Emily just gave this slow nod. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "but it doesn't feel like I thought it would." Brittany gave her shoulder a squeeze. "It never does. But you survived. That's everything." As they left, her lawyer, Mark, handed her an envelope from Megan that had arrived the day before. Emily told a friend she read it that night. Just a few handwritten lines. Emily, I know I can't be forgiven. I was reckless and selfish. I'll carry this guilt forever. I'm sorry. She just put the letter away, never answered. Jake lost his freedom, Connor lost his career, and Megan lost her family. And Emily? She got her restaurant back, her life back. But in the wreckage, she lost the sister she grew up with, the marriage she built, and that innocent piece of her that believed the people closest to you wouldn't be the ones to light the match. The sun rose over the Pacific at 6:15 on the morning of May 15th, 2025. She was holding her Grandma Rose's old cookbook, the leather worn soft. The pages were stained with history, flour, spices, and fingerprints from the woman who taught her that food wasn't just food. It was about survival. It was about putting love back into a world that had tried to bleed you dry. She'd woken up at 4:30 that morning, pulled by this need to go to the one place her grandma always took her when she was a scared kid. Her grandma would hold her hand and say, "The ocean makes everything clean again. The waves don't stop, and neither does life." 6 months. That's how long it had been since Jake got 12 years, Connor got 8, and Megan got 2 years probation for turning on them. 6 months since Emily had walked out of that courthouse, a winner who felt like she'd lost everything that mattered. But she did what her grandma taught her. She rebuilt. The $850,000 from a trust and the $500,000 from Jake weren't just cash. They were ammo. She paid off every single debt on the heirloom kitchen, especially the garbage loans Connor had coached Jake to force on her. She hired a crew that gutted the place. They put up warm terracotta walls, bumped the seating from 25 to 40, and installed a state-of-the-art kitchen to replace the one Jake had systematically wrecked. And on the back wall, she had a mural painted of her grandmother, smiling forever. But the thing she was proudest of wasn't made of drywall and steel. In February, she launched the Rose Heritage Fund. It's a nonprofit that gives grants of up to $20,000 to women escaping abuse who want to start their own food businesses. It gives them legal help, mentors, everything. The fund gave out its first 3 grants in March to future owners of bakeries, catering companies, and food trucks. Watching those women talk about their new lives at an event in Portland apparently brought Emily to tears. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when you start to feel whole again. The heirloom kitchen reopened on April 8th. The menu was a mix of her grandma's classics and her own creations. Her Aunt Sarah came on as a partner, investing her savings and her experience as a nurse to build a place that actually cared about its people. By the end of April, they had a huge feature in Portland Monthly and were nominated for Best Family Restaurant of 2025. But even with the success, the full tables and rave reviews, there was this quiet hole inside her. One night, May 8th, she was closing up around 9 p.m., and she saw her, Megan, standing across the street, hands shoved in her pockets. She didn't move, just stood there for 10 minutes, staring at the bright windows, the happy people, the mural of their grandmother. Then she turned and just disappeared. The next morning, a bouquet of white roses was on the doorstep with a note. It just said, "Emily, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Every day." She took the flowers inside, read the note 100 times, but she couldn't write back. She wasn't ready. A part of her knew she might never be. Some betrayals just cut too deep. So, standing on that beach, waves at her feet, her phone buzzed. It was an email from a woman named Sophia Rossi. She opened it. "Dear Miss Hayes," it said, "My name is Sophia Rossi, and I'm 29. 2 months ago, I escaped a violent marriage with my 7-year-old daughter and nothing else. I've been staying at a women's shelter in Portland, and they told me about the Rose Heritage Fund. My dream has always been to work in a real kitchen. I saw on your website you're hiring. I don't have much experience, but I learn fast, and I promise you won't regret giving me a chance." Model. All right. So, get this. An email lands in Brittany's inbox with a simple question: "Would you be willing to give me a chance?" She reads it twice, this message from the very woman her lover, Jake, had tried to destroy. And she types back: "Dear Olivia, I would be honored. See you at Rose's table Monday at 10 a.m. She hits send, looking out at a rock formation that has taken a beating from the ocean for thousands of years and is still standing. So, what happens after the gavel falls? After Jake is cuffed and hauled off to a cell at the state penitentiary, his partner, Connor, is left with the smoking ruins of the empire they built. And Brittany, the other woman in Jake's life, is left with a silence that's deafening. This is a story about a man who tried to steal a legacy, snuff out a life, and use the one person he promised to protect as a weapon against herself. While Jake was adjusting to his new life behind bars, his wife was looking for a way forward. Sources tell me she found it in an old cookbook. On the first page, her grandmother Rose wrote a simple note: "Never let anyone steal your dreams." In the middle of all that wreckage Jake left behind, she traced those words, and in them, she found her marching orders. Forgiving Brittany seemed impossible, but moving on wasn't. But the real turning point, from what I've been told, wasn't about forgiving Jake or Brittany. It was about forgiving herself, for trusting Jake, for not seeing the monster he was sooner, for thinking his love was a shield when it was really the knife at her back. Rose's kitchen stopped being a business for her. It became a statement. It was proof that women like her, and her new hire Jessica, could survive the absolute worst and build something new from the rubble Jake made. From what I can piece together, her entire mission now is protecting that legacy. It's bigger than her grandmother's recipes. It's about the lifeline that place offers to every woman who walks in needing a fresh start, a safe harbor from men like Jake. As the sun comes up over the coast these days, it's like it's lighting up a future for her that Jake tried so hard to steal. She found a different kind of quiet, not one without pain, but one filled with a new kind of purpose. And the story of how Jake's whole sick plot unraveled is just chilling. My investigation uncovered 3 key moments, 3 inflection points where the truth almost broke free: a toxicology report that told no lies, a hidden camera that saw everything, and finally, Brittany's own confession. And in each of those moments, Jake's wife made a calculated decision to aim for justice, not for revenge. When the person you built a life with betrays you that completely, your first instinct is to burn it all to the ground. But this wasn't about rage. This was about using the system to methodically dismantle Jake's lies and build a clean, undeniable case. This was never about destroying Jake and Connor. It was about creating a firewall so no one else would have to endure what she went through. She admitted she'd been willfully blind for months, believing that Jake's love was all the protection she needed. His betrayal wasn't a car crash. It was a slow, quiet poison he dripped into her life. It was the poison that he stirred into her morning coffee, that hid behind his forged signatures and the smile of a man who called her his world while he was meticulously planning her end. Her gut told her something was off, and ignoring that feeling was the one mistake she swore she'd never make again. That was the crack in the foundation that gave Jake the space to do his worst. The lesson from Jake's spectacular downfall is stark, and it is simple. Protect your assets, document everything, and never let love leave you defenseless. Fantasizing about revenge might give you a rush, but the justice that lets you sleep at night, the kind that actually heals, is served under the cold, bright lights of a courtroom as the truth is laid bare for everyone to see. Because when a betrayal on Jake's level shatters your entire world, rebuilding isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about taking that pain and turning it into power. Rose's kitchen isn't just a place that serves food anymore. It's a place that serves hope. And in the end, that might be the most powerful justice there is. This case is just a raw, powerful story of resilience. It's a testament to how the absolute deepest wounds can be repurposed into something unbreakable. It's a reminder to anyone out there feeling trapped by deceit that survival isn't just about getting by. It's about finding the strength to build a better future. If there's one thing to take away from the quiet power of Jake's wife, it's this. You are never as isolated as the person betraying you wants you to believe. Strength, it turns out, can be found in the legacy of a grandmother and the community you build in the aftermath of the storm.